In ERP and digital transformation failures, there is enough blame to go around, but in the lawsuits that we litigate, the vendors and the integrators are often the contributors to failure. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney. For over 20 years, I've drafted and negotiated a variety of technology-related contracts in the ERP space, and I've litigated ERP failures and digital transformation failures in courts across the country. So in the cases we litigate, software vendors or software integrators are the primary contributors to the failure of the project. And I think it's for a variety of reasons. One of the things we often see is that during the software sales process, vendors will almost always maximize the fit of the software. They'll maximize the functionality of the software, but at the same time, they'll minimize functionality gaps, and they will absolutely downplay the complexity of both the software and the complexity of the implementation or integration process of that software in your business. So I think that is problematic for a variety of ways, one of which is, it sets you up to have unreasonable expectations. So the software vendor is concerned primarily with meeting its numbers, generating a bonus, generating revenue, whatever it is, and that's all warranted and understandable. But when they set up unreasonable expectations instead of just being square with you, I think that you take them at their word, and maybe you're less focused on trying to manage a complex implementation process when you might otherwise have done that and put a team in place to manage that process properly if they had been upfront with you about the length of the implementation process, the cost of the implementation, and the complexity of it. And I think you've got to mitigate the risk associated with that. Software vendors sell software, and that's what they're really good at. But as a consumer of software services and software in general, I think it's caveat emptor, and you need to really look out for yourself, because I will guarantee you that the software vendor is not going to do it for you. Certainly, you need to take what the software vendor says with a grain of salt. You need to come out of that software demonstration understanding that they have given their best foot forward. They have sold you the sizzle. They haven't maybe necessarily sold you the steak. There's a whole bunch of questions that you need to have asked and ask. You should have had a robust software selection process put in place. You want to have RFIs, RFPs that detail what your requirements are. You should have an understanding of what your requirements are from a business perspective and from a technology perspective. And I think it's imperative on you, in order to mitigate the failure rate of these projects, to conduct site visits, see how other customers are using the software in a live production environment. Now understand, in some ways that can have limited value, because I think the reality of it is, and I think most people know this, is that the software vendor, oftentimes will give discounts to customers for the inconvenience of holding a site visit. They're not going to give you access to customers that are critical of the software, but even with that said, I do think there's some value in seeing the software in a production environment, but you have to be able to ask the right questions, and you want to make sure that when you're conducting a site visit, that you're actually visiting a customer that is in your industry, that is in your field, that is a similar size, that uses the software in a similar way that you intend to use the software. Because without doing that, the value of that site visit, I think, is minimal. You need to absolutely check customer references. You need to make sure that what the software vendor is telling you actually makes sense. I think in addition to customer references that can be cherry-picked, you need to do your own investigation by utilizing third-party research firms. You need to use professionals. You need software selection consultants, industry professionals that are going to be able to help you, certainly legal professionals to negotiate your contract. You need to benchmark against other people in your industry that have used the software. How long did it take them to implement and integrate that software? How are they using it? Do due diligence searches to get an understanding if the vendor's ever been sued for misrepresentation, fraud, breach of contract. Same with the integrator. These are all basic things that I think most people fail to do. I think caveat emptor is really the way to go here. You want to make sure that you are doing the due diligence that you need to mitigate the likelihood that the software is going to be oversold, that the software is going to be misrepresented to you. And I think as you go forward with selecting that software and you go to the integration process, I mean, you're really going to want to have a robust contractual framework put in place that allows you to manage that implementation, because I think one of the other contributors to failure really is the propensity of vendors to really assign inexperienced consultants to your project. They will use your project as a training ground. They'll offshore the resources from the Philippines, China, whatever it is, in order to save money, and all at your expense, and that can be incredibly problematic. I think one of the trends now coming out of COVID is primarily remote implementation projects, which I think create a whole host of their own issues. Ideally, you've got people coming on site, understanding your business requirements, understanding how you want that software to work. There's an alignment between yourself and the vendor. All of these things are going to work to mitigate the risk that there is going to be an ERP implementation failure. And I think if you do all of these things, you are really then setting yourself up for success. If you're about to embark on a digital transformation or an ERP implementation project, feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to talk to you, give you an understanding of the lay of the land, what you can expect, and some of the risk mitigation scenarios and processes that we talked about today. We'd like to talk to you about those too, and get you pointed in the right direction.